What's happening? I think we know what's happening. How dare I ever question the idea of a dark horse, a mystery team? I laughed at the idea of a mystery team. I chuckled when I read the tweet from Jonathan Jones from CBS mentioning a dark horse lurking. I apologize, Jonathan Jones. That's my fault. That's my B. Calvin Ridley is not going to be a New England Patriot. Now, I pretty much felt that way last night. So I'm not shocked that he's not a New England Patriot. I am shocked that he's a Tennessee Titan and that he did not stay with Jacksonville. 5 years, $92 million, $50 million guaranteed. Calvin Ridley is going to make $23 million a year. That is way more than I ever anticipated him making. When I looked at Ridley, I thought he would be 19, 20 million. We talked about it this morning. I thought that, other teams were in at 17, 18 million, and maybe Ridley was trying to get to 20 million. He got $23 million a year. That is a gigantic contract. How gigantic? Well, Michael Pittman, who just signed his contract extension with the Indianapolis Colts, he signed for 3 years, $70 million. That's just over $23 million a year. So you are giving Calvin Ridley the same kind of contract that Michael Pittman got from Indy. Michael Pittman's 26 years old. And I know Calvin Ridley, he's 29, going to be 30 in December. But I've said, I feel like Ridley is more 27, 28 because he missed about a year and a half of football. So I don't think he has the legs of a 30-year-old. But when we look at this deal, this is an astronomical deal for Calvin Ridley. Burt Breer reported that the Patriots were offering an astronomical amount of money for Calvin Ridley. Burt tweeted out that he heard the Patriots had put about $22 million a year on the table. Now, if I told you this morning that the Patriots were willing to give Calvin Ridley $22 million a year, what would your response be? What would your reaction be? What would you think? You would probably think I was crazy. If I was sitting here doing the podcast this morning and said the Patriots should pay Calvin Ridley $22 million a year, you would scream me off the internet. You would be yelling at me, telling me to stop podcasting immediately. You're out of your mind. Find something else to do with your life. That's what many of you would say if I had just suggested $22 million a year. So the Patriots were willing to pay a ton of money. The Patriots put a ton of money on the table. They put a Michael Pittman-like deal on the table. Now, we don't know the overall package that the Patriots had actually offered, right? We know it's about $22 million a year, but how many years? What were the guarantees? You have to look at the details, and we don't know the details. But around $22 million a year is more money than I thought the Patriots would be willing to give up for Ridley. That is above what I anticipated. And Calvin Ridley literally just tweeted out 3 minutes ago, chess, not checkers, love all, Ridley. So he's doing cartwheels. And look, good for Calvin Ridley. He got the bag. He got a ridiculous bag. I mean, he's got a suspension in his past that we know. And he still is able to walk away with $23 million a year, $50 million guaranteed. Now, here's the thing. And we can't overlook this. And I might be a little off on my math. Okay. So don't kill me if I'm a little off on the math. But we got to remember taxes. And I know this is somewhat boring talk, but this is part of the analysis. This is part of the conversation. When you're working on a contract, when you're working on a deal, when you're working with compensation, you have to look at total money. You've got to look at taxes, cost of living, all of those things. I don't think it was an accident. Jonathan Jones, who was obviously plugged in on this. Jonathan Jones tweeted out after our podcast today something about cost of living and state taxes. To me, that was a message to the Patriots that, hey, if you want our guy, you have to pay more than what's on the table right now. And if Tennessee had $23 million on the table, you have to go above and beyond $23 million a year to get my guy because of taxes and because of cost of living. So if you want to play that game, the Patriots If they wanted to sign Ridley, and Ridley wanted to make at least $23 million a year, because there is no state tax in Tennessee. If Ridley wanted to make $23 million a year, the Patriots would have to come over the top of that offer and offer like $25 million a year. That's what it would have cost the Patriots to match this Titans deal. And we're not even talking about cost of living. That's just taxes. 9% in Massachusetts when you make more than $1 million. 9% is about $2 million. $2 million. So if you're the Patriots, you would have to offer Calvin Ridley $25 to $26 million a year. You would go well over $100 million in the total deal, and you would likely have to give up what, $55, $60 million guaranteed? So you would have to go way above and beyond. Tyreek Hill plays for Miami, no state taxes. So, I mean, when you look at this deal for Calvin Ridley and the idea that he doesn't have to worry about state income taxes, I mean, this is just an absolute haul. Back up the Brinks truck over and over and over again. And I've got to ask you, would you be willing to pay Calvin Ridley $25 million a year? Because that's the question. This is going to be framed differently. People are going to frame this as if, oh, well, the Patriots, they just didn't want to pay. They just didn't want to pay. What I want to know from those people is, would you be willing to pay Calvin Ridley, who many people told me is not a number one? I think he is a number one. He would have absolutely been a number one for the Patriots. Would you be willing to pay this guy $25 million a year, $26 million a year? Because that's what it would have taken. And as much as I love Calvin Ridley, and as much as I wanted Calvin Ridley, and I wanted him badly, as much as I wanted him, that is crazy money. And I don't look at Ridley as an any means necessary kind of guy. I just don't. I don't look at him as an any means necessary. If T. Higgins was a free agent, you might be able to talk me into $25 million a year. But there's not many guys out there. Justin Jefferson. What do you think Justin Jefferson is going to get now? If Jefferson was out there, I'd be willing to pay $25, $26 million a year. I mean, it is a huge amount of money. Andrew Callahan posted that Ridley is signing the NFL's sixth richest wide receiver contract by total value. Sixth richest. Ninth richest by average annual value. He's tied for 10th richest by total guarantee. David Lombardi out on the West Coast, he posted on Twitter, as far as fully guaranteed money, there is one wide receiver in football that is going to make more guaranteed money than Calvin Ridley. And that one guy is Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill is going to make $52.5 million guaranteed. Ridley's going to make $50 million. I mean, my goodness. That is much more than I ever thought Calvin Ridley would get. And that's why I asked the question this morning when we were doing the podcast. How much are you willing to extend? I thought going to $20 million was extending and would be justified. Patriots went to $22 million, and it still wasn't enough. Man, oh man. Rob D jumps in and says, my take is simple. If they wanted the player and failed to meet the market, then shame on them. I want to hear from Wolf on this. We deserve to know. Well, I don't know if Elliot Wolf is going to comment on the specifics of negotiations. People don't usually do that, whether it's a GM, president of football operations. Now, some do, as far as giving you as much as they can. I don't know if Wolf is going to go out there and say, well, yeah, we offered this much and he wanted this much and it was too much. I don't know how much we want to look at this. But I do think when you look at it, you know, the state income tax is a big deal. It's 9%. It's 9%. So here's what I would say. Rob D says they failed to meet the market. Well, not really. I mean, they offered him $22 million. and Tennessee offered $23 million. But I go back to the Jonathan Jones tweet. I don't think that Jonathan Jones tweet was an accident. Jonathan Jones is the same guy from CBS that tweeted that there was a dark horse lurking that I made fun of or I doubted, and now I got egg on my face. And when Jones tweeted out today about cost of living and state taxes, that was sent to the Patriots. That was a message sent to the Patriots. So the fact is, the Patriots have to go above market value to bring somebody in at all times, but especially when you're looking at somebody like Ridley. Because Ridley, he wants the most money he can get. And if he wants the most money that he can get, and he's going to pocket $23 million a year, the Patriots would have to go $2 to $3 million per year above that market just to land him. So it's not about just the player's market. If the Patriots offered the same money as Tennessee, he's picking Tennessee. If they offered $24 million, he's picking Tennessee. He might pick Tennessee unless the Patriots offered $27, $28 million. How far do you want to go? So I understand the thought, and I agree with the general opinion of, well, you've got to meet the market, and if you don't meet the market. But when we talk about specific cases and situations, when you look at this, I don't know if Ridley takes a deal from the Patriots unless they pay him 25, 26, maybe even $27 million a year. And so that would be the Patriots market, not the Titans market, not even Jacksonville's market, because Florida also doesn't have a state income tax. So that's part of the story that you're battling, and we can't overlook that. You are already going above and beyond. Now, I understand people will say, you know, the other wide receivers are going to get paid more as we go along, and I understand that. It's whether or not you believe Calvin Ridley is a top 5 receiver at the NFL level. Would you say that Calvin Ridley's a top 5 or 6 receiver? What would you say? Again, right now he's the 6th richest wide receiver contract by total value. Average annual value, he's 9th. So you could look at that. You could argue and say it's fair. Guaranteed money, 2nd most. And again, if you're going to pay that guaranteed money, if you're the Patriots, you got to put a little sugar on top because of the state income tax. Same idea. So if he gets $50 million guaranteed in his pocket from the Titans, he's going to be asking for $55, $60 million guaranteed from the Patriots, which would be $3 to $8 million more than what Tyreek Hill got guaranteed. I mean, I can't kill the Patriots for not offering 25, 26, 27 million to Calvin Ridley, whatever it would have been. I thought 20 million was appropriate. But when we get to, 25, 26 million, man. Carlos jumps in with a super chat. I would overpay for Ridley if it meant giving our future rookie quarterback a reliable weapon to throw to help build his confidence. We have to overpay now, in my opinion, to help build this offense. I'm massively disappointed. I understand. Everybody has different limits. Everybody looks at teams and they say, well, I would want them to pay this. I would want them to pay that. You look at a certain player and say, I'd be willing to pay this much for this guy. I understand all of that. I do. To me, when you get to 25, 26 million for Calvin Ridley, that's when I have to take a step back and take a deep breath and say, that's out of my range. That's a bit heavy. 20 million, okay. 22 million. Like, I can't get angry at Elliott Wolf or the Patriots for putting $22 million a year on the table to a guy that nobody, as of yesterday, thought should be making more than 18 or 19. Right? So, as far as the other part, though, that Carlos brings up, because it's a legitimate point to make. If you're drafting a quarterback, you need to surround that quarterback. I agree. What I would say is the offseason is not over, right? Now, if we get to the draft and we're talking about a team that doesn't have legitimate wide receiver weapons, then we got problems. Then we got big problems. If you don't fix what you need to fix on this offense, if Elliott Wolf fails to get a legitimate bona fide wide receiver into New England, then he deserves all the criticism in the world. But right now, we don't know what is going to happen and what the pivot is going to be. I'll give you an example. What happens if Elliott Wolf decides to pivot and he trades for Brandon Ayuk? Or he pivots and he trades for T. Higgins? Now, of course, those players are going to cost you more money than Calvin Ridley cost you, but you've got to look at age, you've got to look at production, you've got to look at consistency. So what happens if Elliott Wolf pivots and trades for Brandon Ayuk? Are you still mad? So I think we've got to see if there is a pivot and what the pivot is. I'm not going to sit here and go bananas over not having a number one receiver on March 13th. If we get to draft time and we're talking about not having a wide receiver, then again, I've got some big time issues, and I will scold Elliott Wolf from pillar to post, and he will deserve it because this football team absolutely needs a number one wide receiver. Don't get it twisted. Absolutely, they need a number one wide receiver. And now they got to go out and get one. Whether that's draft, whether that is, trading for an established veteran, however you do it, you need a number one receiver. If they don't love somebody in the draft, they go out and they draft Marvin Harrison, or maybe they move down and draft Roma Dunze or Malik Neighbors. Maybe they trade back into the first round. Maybe they get aggressive in the draft and they trade up from the second round into the first and they draft somebody like A.D. Mitchell. I mean, remember, there's a lot of things that you can do if you're willing to do it. I mean, the Texans last year, they walked into the draft. They walk out of the draft with C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson. Who saw that coming? So if the Patriots want to move into the first round, they can do it. If they want to draft somebody like Michael Penix and they don't love May or Daniels, if that's what they want to do, they could draft somebody like Penix and they could draft Marvin Harrison Jr. Again, I would go tackle. I think quarterback and tackle is the most important needs for this football team, and I stand by that. I've said that from day one. Quarterback, tackle, wide receiver. So that's what I would be looking at. If I loved the quarterback at 3, I'm taking the quarterback at 3. If I don't love the quarterback at 3, then I'm moving down and I'm looking at tackle. And then I'm seeing what I can do with the extra draft capital that I picked up from moving down. And I'm trying to move up. I'm trying to move back into the first round to get myself a wide receiver. So we don't know what the pivot is going to be. I agree with the sentiment, though, Carlos, that you need, if you're going to have a rookie quarterback, which we don't know yet, but if it is going to be a rookie quarterback and that rookie quarterback is going to play, let's not forget, if that rookie quarterback is going to play, he's going to need somebody that he can depend on. I agree with that 100%. The question is, we know it's not going to be Calvin Ridley. Who is it going to be? And are the Patriots going to go out and do what they've got to do? Kinkado says, super chat, thank you, Kinkado. Is there any clarity on Booty's status for 2024? No, I haven't seen anything. I would say that I would likely expect Booty to not be around in 2024. That's what I would say. That's what I would say. All right, before we continue with your thoughts, and I have more thoughts on Calvin Ridley, want to let you know the Nick Cattle Show is brought to you by First Class Glazing. If you need your bathroom renovated or that bathtub glazed, check out First Class Glazing. Craftsmen dedicated to delivering top-tier results using premium materials, precise techniques. That bathroom space that you've always wanted, you can have it thanks to our friends at First Class Glazing, firstclassglazing.com, or you can call Jose at 617-849-0513, 617-849-0513. And if you mention this podcast, you will get a free estimate and 10% off. So thanks to First Class Glazing. One more thing I want to add, because I haven't mentioned this, and we're about 20 minutes into this podcast. Please give us a thumbs up. If you're watching and you like what we're doing here, give us that thumbs up. More thumbs means more eyeballs. Build the community. So give us that thumbs up. Don't forget to comment and subscribe. We are trying to reach 2,500 subscriptions by April 1st. I think we're about 30, 40 away from that last time I checked. So if you can subscribe, we would love that. But give us that like. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. And if you're catching up on demand, Spotify, Apple Pods, don't forget to rate and review. And by the way, my Patreon people, I'm going to record a podcast at some point tonight. I wanted to get that podcast dropped to you by 7 o'clock. But of course, this news broke. So I will get a podcast to you later on tonight for Patreon members. And if you want to check out the Patreon page for the exclusive content, patreon.com/Nick Cattles, Cattles. Again, Patreon, $5 a month, $1.25 a week. All right, so Rob D jumps in and says, cash to burn, maybe not so much, LOL. Right now, it doesn't look good as far as cash to burn. But we don't know what they're going to do. They have burned cash. They have spent cash. The Mike Oweno deal was no joke. The Kyle Duggar deal, if they get a long-term contract extension worked out, that will not be a joke. But yeah, we'll talk about it in a minute. But now the pressure is on. Calvin Ridley's off the market. I'm not going to kill them for not going to 25, 26 million a year for Calvin Ridley. I'm not going to kill him. I think that would be a bad deal. But now they've got to pivot, and now they've got to find somebody else. And if they fail to do that, I am going to kill them. Not literally. I am going to go after Elliott Wolf and Gerard Mayo in that front office for not finding a true number one receiver. So we'll see how they pivot and what they do. I'll talk about that again a little bit more in a minute. But a 5-year term, that's also interesting. A 5-year term is interesting for Calvin Ridley. Would you have gone 5 years? That's another part of this. Now, of course, you can cut him. It all depends on how the money's laid out. But I think, you're comfortable playing Calvin Ridley 3 years or so, right? 30 years old in December. So you're probably looking at 3 years, possibly 4. So that's good term as well. Would you be comfortable with Calvin Ridley being the highest paid guy on your team? Somebody's got to be. Now, we also have to remember, and I touched on this for a minute this morning. When you bring somebody in like this, when you sign somebody like this, it impacts everybody else in the room. Everybody else in that locker room is looking at the deal that Calvin Ridley just signed, and they want theirs. And they want to be paid at the very tippity top of the market. So if you're paying Calvin Ridley 25, 26 million, if you're going to do that, you best be prepared to pay everybody in that room that you want to keep at the very top of the market. Now, you can do that, and there's no problem with it. I'm just saying that is part of the math. That's part of the math. Guys know. Guys know how much other guys are making. So, again, when you look at it, and KJ says the 5 years is a fake number, I would agree. That's why I just said, you're looking at probably 3 years. The 5-year term is the funny money in the agent leak. So I think it's going to, when we see this, it's going to be likely $50 million guaranteed in the first 2 years. And they might keep him, for the third year, dependent on how much it is on the base and what the cap hit is and all of that stuff. So I agree with you, KJ. I don't think it ends up being a 5-year deal. But the agent and the player, they want that number out there. To me, it's, would you be willing to pay him $26 million a year? Would you be willing to pay him $55 to $60 million guaranteed? That, to me, is the question. And that's going a little too far for Calvin Ridley, at least to me. I know everybody has their different thoughts and views. But again, if we're talking 2 months from now, 3 months from now, and they still don't have a wide receiver one, then I would have said, well, maybe I would be willing to extend. Maybe I would be willing to bring in 24, 25 million a year for Calvin Ridley because it's better than not having anybody. But I do not anticipate that happening. And let's put it this way. If the Patriots fail to bring in a legitimate wide receiver and they don't go all out in the draft, right? Then there's going to be a bunch of issues here because we cannot forget what Elliott Wolf said at the Combine. He talked about weaponizing this offense. And right now, Antonio Gibson, Hunter Henry, and Austin Hooper and Jacoby Brissett is not weaponizing the offense. Now, it's March 13th. We will see what the final product looks like. But right now, it's not nearly enough. I know that. You know that. I have to imagine Wolf and Mayo know that. So when you come out and you publicly say that you want to weaponize the offense, you better weaponize that offense. You best weaponize that offense. That's what I would do, right? Figure out a way. Figure out a freaking way to weaponize this offense. By the time you get to mandatory minicamp, we better be talking about weaponization. And that could be the draft. Again, that could be the draft. So we don't know what's going to happen here. Right now, it's disappointing. Right now, it's a bummer for many of us. I think many of us wanted Calvin Ridley. I wanted Calvin Ridley. But I can't blame the Patriots for not going as far as they would have had to go to bring him in, because I think there are other options out there, which, again, I'll get to in a minute. Weinstab jumps in. Thanks for the super chat. Again, if you want to jump to the front of the line with your question or your comment, you can do so by sending a super chat. Bummer. I was so looking forward to going to Foxwoods with Ridley and placing some bets. LOL. Time to throw a bag at Jonah at tackle. I'm going to get to that in a second. But before I get to that, Weinstab, again, thank you. I appreciate you for the super chat. Throw a thumb up for us. Thumbs up. More thumbs means more eyeballs. The more likes, the bigger this community grows, more people in the chat, more fun we have. So if you're chilling out, just watching and listening, give us that thumb, like us, comment, subscribe as well. That helps. Trying to hit 2,500 subscriptions by April 1st. We're inching closer. We're about 30 or 40 away. So all of that helps us. Rate and review, Spotify, Apple Pods as well. Before I get to some of the things that I think the Patriots now have to do, they have to do it. To me, okay? If they don't do these things, then I'm going to have an issue. I'm going to have an issue in real time. It would be a massive failure if they don't do some other things now that they lost on Calvin Ridley. But before I get to that, I do think we have to point out the personal factor here too. It is quite possible that even if the Patriots did match the money, including the state income tax, and gave Calvin Ridley the bag at like $26 million a year, it's still possible that Ridley would have said no. Because let's remember, we had heard that he was leaning towards Jacksonville, right? He was leaning towards Jacksonville. It seemed like he wasn't really into the idea of New England. And so not only did you have the state income tax to worry about, you would have had, as Tom Curran calls it, the suck tax to worry about. And the idea that he didn't want to go to the Northeast. So even if you got to $25 million a year, he still might have taken the 23 from Tennessee and said, nah, I'm good. Because all of his life, Calvin Ridley has been in the South. He was born in Florida. He grew up in Florida. He went to high school in Florida. He then played at Alabama. Then he was drafted by the Atlanta Falcons. Then he was traded to Jacksonville, back in Florida where he grew up. And now he's signing with Tennessee. He might just be a dude who wants to stay South. And so, that's another part of the equation that we have to remember and acknowledge. I'm not telling you that he would have not taken, he wouldn't take the $26 million from the Patriots if they offered it. I just wonder about the personal side of this as well. All right. So what can the Patriots do? First question is, what's the pivot? What is your pivot? You get an idea? You want your comment? You want your question? Send a super chat. What is your pivot? You're out on Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley is a Tennessee Titan. What are you doing if you're Elliott Wolf? Wide receiver is a desperate need. What are you doing? The first thing you can look at it and say to yourself is a trade. You can look at Brandon Ayuk. You can look at T. Higgins. Now, how much are they going to want? Their price tag just went up. How much do you have to give? This might actually work in the favor of the Patriots. And you might think I'm crazy, but hear me out. This might work for the Patriots because if San Francisco or Cincinnati doesn't want to spend, I don't know, $26 million a year on Ayuk, $26 million on T. Higgins, if they don't want to get to that level of spending, if you're Cincinnati, you're not going to pay T. Higgins long term. You've got Jamar Chase. Now, San Francisco might want to hold on to Brandon Ayuk, but you know what that might cause? That might open up Deebo Samuel. So this is how things are affected and impacted by every decision. So it actually might help the Patriots at the end of the day how much Calvin Ridley signed for in Tennessee, because the larger the contract, you might not have to spend the draft capital, because the Patriots can tell San Francisco, they can tell Cincinnati, look, Calvin Ridley just signed that huge contract. We're going to have to pay T. Higgins $26-27 million. We're going to have to pay that guy $60 million guaranteed. If it's San Francisco, you're saying the same thing to the Niners. And we're not going to give you more than X because we got to pay that guy $60 million guaranteed. So how much is it going to cost? What is the draft capital? I'd be willing to pay more money for Brandon Ayuk than I would be willing to pay for Calvin Ridley. I'd be willing to pay more money for T. Higgins than I would be willing to pay for Calvin Ridley. But now what is the pick? What's the capital? What's it going to cost you? So that is one of the most important questions. So that's one thing that you can look at. Other ideas in a minute. John D. jumps in with a super chat, disappointed about Ridley, but in Wolf we trust. Disappointment. Look, you can feel any way you want to feel. I am disappointed. I'm disappointed that Ridley's not a Patriot. I don't know how motivated he was to be a Patriot. Everything that's been leaking over the past couple of days would tell you that he wasn't really motivated to move up to New England. And then you throw the money on top of it. You know, you can pay $25 million, $26 million a year to a guy that might not even want to be in the Northeast and just, took the money. And I'm not going to comment and go too deep on this because I don't know the situation. I know that Ridley has talked about it somewhat publicly, but let's not forget, Ridley left the NFL for a while because of mental health. And that has to be a part of your conversation. Now, obviously, the Patriots were comfortable enough to offer him reportedly $22 million a year. So that did not scare them off. But would you have been willing to pay $26-27 million a year? I don't know. It's an answer that Elliot Wolf would have to give us. So you've got to wonder how motivated Calvin Ridley was. Did he really want to come to New England? I mean, I'm sitting here speculating that it would have taken $25-26 million because of the taxes. If this guy wasn't really interested in coming to New England, it might have taken even more than that. And at the end of the day, he might not have even wanted to be here. He still might have taken Tennessee money with the no state income tax and be, a 90-minute flight away from Jacksonville. A 2-hour flight into Florida where he grew up, I think Coconut Creek. All right, so you can trade Ayuk, T. Higgins out there. Another guy, as we know, Mike Williams was released earlier today by the Chargers. Interesting name. We know that the Patriots reportedly were talking to the Chargers. They made phone calls about the guys that could be available. Keenan Allen, Williams, Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa. It was reported today by Adam Schefter that Khalil Mack restructured his contract. He's likely going to stay in L.A. Joey Bosa, I would think, is probably out. I would think the Chargers want to hold on to Keenan Allen. I do not anticipate Allen being available. But Mike Williams now is available, and it's just money. And I don't think Mike Williams is going to be signing a Calvin Ridley-like contract. I would be interested in Mike Williams. But I would say two things about Mike. Number one, incentives. A lot of the deal would be incentives. I'm not going to hand over a bunch of guaranteed money to Mike Williams. Not with the injury history, not coming off of an ACL. So give me the incentives, okay? If he's willing to take a deal that's heavy on incentives, I'm interested. But I also think you've got to back that up with more. You can't depend on Mike Williams. You can't rely on him. You'll have two guys in your wide receiver room coming off of ACLs. That's not ideal. Kendrick Bourne coming off of an ACL, Mike Williams coming off of an ACL. Not great. Two of your top 3 or 4 receivers coming off ACLs. So I would say incentive-laden deal with Mike Williams, and he can't be your only move. He can't be the guy. He can't be the move of the offseason at wide receiver. That would be a mistake. So that's what I would say. I would look at it, and I would incentive-laden deal the hell out of it, and I would also make other moves aside from Mike Williams. And if he works out, great. If he doesn't, then I didn't go crazy and handcuff myself. Horace Williams says, I want Odunze and Penix. I want a quarterback first. But if you're not in love with May and Daniels, that's a path that you can take. Again, I've stated this before. If I'm the Patriots, I'm looking at quarterback, offensive tackle. To me, those are the two most important needs. Quarterback, tackle. That's what I would be looking at. I still think that wide receiver is down third on my list. Weinstead jumps in and says, we played the Titans in Tennessee this year. Let's get them. I was actually thinking about making that trip. Nashville's great. So imagine that. DeAndre Hopkins last year, Calvin Ridley this year. Freaking Tennessee, man. You're killing me. You're killing me, Tennessee. Rob D, please stop with the taxes. We are not unique in this regard. There are other states with higher taxes. It matters to working stiffs like us, but multimillionaires, come on, dude. Rob, again, Jonathan Jones tweeted about state taxes and cost of living. I will guarantee you those words came from Calvin Ridley's agent. I can guarantee it. I would borderline put a limb on it. That tweet was not by mistake. How many times? Let me ask you this, Rob. How many times have you seen an NFL insider tweet out about an impending free agent? How many times have you seen somebody tweet out cost of living and state taxes? There's a specific reason why that was tweeted. By the guy who had been ahead of the curve on this entire Ridley story. The only guy that was tweeting about a dark horse was Jonathan Jones. Where do you think he got that information from? He got that information from Calvin Ridley's agent. And then 24 hours later, he's tweeting out about state taxes and cost of living. It's a real thing. And by the way, I understand that they're not unique in this regard. I've moved across the country for my career. I'm not making multi-millions of dollars, but I moved to California to do radio. I knew all about taxes and cost of living, okay? But the difference here is that the Patriots were battling two teams that have zero state taxes. They weren't battling somebody who had state taxes. They weren't battling San Francisco. They weren't battling the Raiders. They weren't battling those teams, right? They were battling Tennessee, no state tax, Jacksonville, no state tax. So whether you want to admit it or not, it's absolutely a part of this story, Rob. And I'll stand by it. That tweet doesn't happen by accident. That was a message. If you want my guy, that was from the agent. If you want my guy, then you better pay up. And you better pay for cost of living and state taxes, which would get you above 25, 26 million, by the way, per year. All right. What else can the Patriots do? Well, now they need to reallocate the money. If you were willing to spend $22 million a year on Calvin Ridley, now what are you going to allocate that money towards? because theoretically, you should have that money to spend on other players, right? So when you look at the $22 million per year, what do you do with that $22 million? How do you reallocate it? Do you reallocate it towards a Brandon Ayuk deal? Do you reallocate it towards, somebody like T. Higgins? And by the way, the Patriots just signed a guard, Nick Leverett, Tampa Bay Buccaneer. He started 10 games in 2022. And that had been reported going back a couple of weeks ago that the Patriots were looking for some extra interior line depth. So that's not a surprise. So now they have a guard coming in. Makes sense. Cole Strange. They don't know how healthy he is. So makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. The other thing I would say is, and you're going to hear a lot about this, same old Patriots. Disagree. What's different? What's different with Elliott Wolf than these other guys? What's different than Elliott Wolf and the old regime? You know what the difference is? The old regime wouldn't even be on the phone looking for a wide receiver one. Do you honestly think the old regime would have put $22 million a year on the table for Calvin Ridley? If you believe that, you weren't watching the past 2 decades. When's the last time this team was even willing to entertain the idea of paying a wide receiver at the top of the market? I totally disagree with the notion that this is the same old, same old. It's not the same old, same old. It's just not. They would not even entertain the idea of Calvin Ridley. We would be talking about Hollywood Brown or somebody else as the number one target for the Patriots this offseason. We all know that. The prior regime didn't have any respect to pay the money at the top for a wide receiver. We know that. So I don't agree with the idea, because you're going to hear it, that this is the same old, same old. I don't think the old regime dumps $22 million on the table and says, hey, Calvin, take it or leave it. I don't think that would have happened. So you can trade, you can look at Mike Williams, but again, you can reallocate the money. Here's what the Patriots have to do. They have to land one of the tackles. The Patriots now have to land Jonah Williams or Tyron Smith. Have to. You cannot walk away from this free agency without a top-notch wide receiver and without a top-notch tackle. Top-notch, I mean as far as the class goes. You have to get one of those guys. It's desperation time. You have to now get one of Smith or Williams. Full stop. Full freaking stop. You sign one of those two guys. You also, I think, should go hard after free safety. Because now, if you're not going to allocate that money towards offense, if you're not going to spend the $22 million a year on offense, then move it to defense. And there are still good defensive players out there. I would be calling Justin Simmons right now. I would be calling Justin Simmons, and I would be looking to get Simmons in here. That's what I would be doing. Stud free safety. I'd be willing to pay Justin Simmons. 1 year, 2 year, whatever. I'd be willing to pay him. Go out and get Tyron Smith or Jonah Williams. Go out and get Justin Simmons. Go out and get one of the cornerbacks. How about the idea of somebody like Kendall Fuller? So use that money. And again, the Patriots, we understand this, they have to spend. So what I want now, again, aside from the wide receiver, if they don't get a wide receiver that's worth his salt, then it is a fail. You didn't get Calvin Ridley. I'm disappointed, but I understand. But you best go out and find somebody else now. That is a given. Aside from wide receiver, you best get one of the top tackles. You best spend money on the defense. Because nobody offensively is worth $20 million a year right now. Nobody out there on the market. Hollywood Brown is not worth $20 million, okay? So if you were going to pay $22 million to Calvin Ridley, Then you take that $22 million and you take Tyron Smith or Jonah Williams. Then you jump over to free safety and you dump money on Justin Simmons. And then you go to cornerback and you dump some money there and you say, this offseason, we had to spend to bump our cap number. And because offensively, we weren't able to bring in Mike Evans, Michael Pittman, or Calvin Ridley, we decided to reallocate that money towards defense and offensive line. And so you end up with Michael Wenu. You end up with one of the best tackles available. You end up with two of the best secondary guys that are out there. That's what I would do. I want to see the Patriots spend this money. I want to see the Patriots spend the money that they were willing to spend on Calvin Ridley, because we know that you have it now. We know that you got it. And I would also mention Courtland Sutton. Greg Bedard's been talking about that. I tweeted that earlier. Courtland Sutton is somebody that I would absolutely look at. If Denver's willing to trade Sutton, I would absolutely look at him. I'd be willing to trade a pick for Sutton, not the second-round pick, not a third-round pick. I'd be open to the idea of trading a fourth-round pick and getting Sutton and putting him on the outside. So that's how they need to reallocate. The offseason's not lost. It's March 13th. It's incredibly disappointing that Calvin Ridley's going to play in Tennessee. I don't know how motivated he was to play here. I don't think he was very motivated, given the tweets that we saw the past couple of days. So you pick yourself up, you put the pieces together, and now you go out and you do some damage. You got a ton of money to spend. Spend it. You've been waiting. We've all been waiting for the Ridley decision. It went against you. It didn't go your way. Pivot, spend money, and put talent on this team at positions of need. That's what you need to do. That's what you need to do. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe. More thumbs up means more people watch the product. We always appreciate that. So give us that thumbs up. Rate and review if you're listening on Spotify and Apple Pods. Patreon channel, patreon.com/Nick Cattles, Cattles, patreon.com. And $5 a month, $1.25 a week. That's it. Exclusive content to you. I do want to pull this one up, Val. Sutton will cost a fourth and a future sixth. I'm all in. I'm all in. I would go out and I would do that. Absolutely. Jay in the AVL says, is Sutton a 1, though? I think he's been held back by quarterback play in Denver. I don't know if he would end up being a 1A, but I think he's been held back by the quarterback situation. Denver's had a hell of a time trying to figure out the quarterback position. My question is, Courtland Sutton, better than anybody on this team right now? A hell of a lot better than anything you have on this current roster. If you told me the Patriots ended up with Courtland Sutton in 2 rookie wide receivers, along with Kendrick Bourne and Pop Douglas, I'd be okay with that. I'd be okay with that. I'd be good. All right. Got to go eat dinner. Appreciate all of you. Like, comment, subscribe. Patreon.com/Nick Cattles. Something else breaks. We'll see if I jump on here. If it's a big enough deal, I probably will, because that's what I do. I appreciate all of you, even the people that disagree with me. It's all good. That's what this is about, right? Back and forth, disagree, agree, as long as we're doing it kind of respectfully and, not being ridiculous about it. So I appreciate every single one of you. Have a fantastic night. I'm back tomorrow, 11 a.m. sharp, if nothing breaks. Until then, it's the Nick Cattles.